thank you for inviting me to be in conversation with Noor. I've known Noor, as you mentioned, since she was a student, so I'm really privileged to be in conversation with her as I've seen the evolvement of her practice. We're going to have a conversation about the ideas in her work and the three films, and maybe we'll start with this question about the soundscape, particularly as the first film is silent, and then this question of sound. So I was wondering if you could speak to the significance of the soundscape and the authoring of the soundscape in the works.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, everyone. The first film was silent. I mean, I did it 10 years ago, and I did a lot in between the first film and the second film on digital. And I went back to analog. And we can talk about this after. But in the second film, all the sound you hear we recorded them in the caves and in the hole. And Maya, the singer, we also recorded her there. So I gave all this research or material to the composer, Dirar, and we worked over 6 months to imagine a soundscape. And what does it mean? And how can you build, not only the space, but the sound of it. So it's like sculpting of sound in relation to the site. But all the sound you hear are formations of the original things that we recorded there, so there's nothing extra added.
So they have a very strong relationship to the place in that way.
Totally, yes. There's nothing outside of the place. I think even people, they're very local. Mm-hmm. With the third film, I see it as a continuation of the second film, so it's the same composer. And this time I chose, after long research in the Sonic Archive in Ramallah, I came across this song of this old woman, but she sings it's a song for the fighters. I mean, it's really simple recordings that the Popular Arts Center in Palestine are gathering on a volunteer basis. So they go to people's houses and they record women singing. So the file of this woman, it was very naturally recorded, and it was a song that I really did not hear. It did not make its way through our time, you know.
Okay.
So I also liked that, and I took the song, and it became the only narration of the film, and we built the other sound around it also.
So it was almost kind of lost in the archive, and and this woman's voice in the archive, and you retrieved it in that way. I was also really interested to ask you about the use of analog as well, and particularly the 8mm and the 16mm, and what is its significance to you in creating these in these works?
For me, I started with it in a very literal sense. I honestly like the sensitivity of it, the slow aspect of it. It's a bit against this consumer culture of image making and representation. And I look at my very long interest in the history of colonialism in relation to image making and representation, especially in Palestine. All the images are made about us, are very Western, made by Western and Orientalists, and we started to make our own images with the revolution in the militant cinema in the 50s and 60s, and I was amazed by these. They were analog also, yeah. And I look at them so many times. They are on YouTube, a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And I remember in one of the films, most of them are shot in the camps of Lebanon and Jordan. And in one of the films, I see a little girl on how to say, bicycle or something in the camps, and all the shots of the fighters and you know this, and then there's little girls, so reminded me of the daily life on analog. There's a sense of time there that it really hit me, and I wanted that timelessness in the images I create, hoping that I can create a new mode of representation for that land, to intervene in that history literally with the medium itself, to drop it inside all that binary history somehow and make an image of the daily life on that material. But also the analog has a lot of restrictions, which I really like, and it helps me with rehearsing on set. So when you put the reel, it's 3 minutes only, so you cannot film endlessly and then choose, and then, so for me it's a very performative act, and there's a lot of respect to the land, and to me, I just feel it, because we rehearse on set, and then when you click the camera, it's, you know, the film is over. So the rehearsal and the performance and it's all in there. And this restriction really, for me, it relates to the restriction of our bodies, of the land. And also it has this darkness and light, so if it's exposed to light, the film is gone, and then you film, then you cannot see the footage until weeks later. So all this for me is conceptually fits in how I see the concepts of the film also.
And then it's interesting too, the kind of question of the frame and the way you use it in the with the analog in particular, because as you said, you have these, you have a lot of starkness in the way in which we go from moments of light into moments of darkness into moments of burnt film as well. So that also kind of creates a particular kind of narration in the films as well.
Yes, and I try to keep it as raw as possible. So I always say I edit on set, not after. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course I do after, but on set I am editing also. So when the footage comes to me, I do the other round of edits, of course, but it's very performative, and I also keep the full frame,
yes,
like up and down. I just wanted it to look like archival document, untouched. It has a documentary feeling, even of the way of filmmaking. Very roughly edited, very roughly developed. It's just there in your face somehow. It's very bodily.
Yes, yeah. In relation to that with the body, I was going to ask you about the significance of dance and your research into dance, and particularly as in parts of the film, dance is quite aggressive, and then it's overtly performative as well. So you have different types of dance throughout the in both of the films. So I was wondering if you could also speak to that, because it's a very prominent aspect. Yeah.
True. So I think my interest in dance started from the interest of movement in general. And I think I came across the notion of social choreography 8 years ago, maybe. And I think that changed my whole, the way I work. And briefly, if I will say what is social choreography, it's how, what is the ideology that we embody in our bodies. So rather than imposing theories on a body or a space, the theory or the ideology is already performed. So if you study movement and how people move, why they move the way they move, you will reveal a lot of the social political in a certain situation or a space. And for me, in Palestine, it's just observing and listening to the spaces and to see the movement. This is where all it started from. And of course, in Palestine, the body in space, it's a whole, it's our life, actually. Yes. So it started from there. For me, the special interest in dance, because I always saw dance as this social construction, What Fanon says about dance also I like a lot, because he describes it as the circle of permission, where the body liberates itself and actually reveals all the layers of oppression, of, especially under colonial structure. So this I took for me for a long time, and I started also to observe. So in the second film, the two women dancing, it really comes from my mom taking me to weddings when I was a child. I come from a village, and then these women in a circle, and two women come to the middle, and they compete who jumps more. And it's called natta, the jump dance. And I found that very funny. It's amazing. And I would look at them endlessly, and they go so long, just jumping. So for me, how to choreograph a jump, this was the challenge, but to intensify it also.
Yes, it definitely, the intensification with a sense of aggressive competition in that between the women really kind of comes out. And you can really see the echo of it in dances of weddings as well, particularly between women. The kind of echoes into the social context can be read. But that also takes you to the question of choreography, which you also have running through the three films, and the way in which you work with choreography, again, also in relation to the locations as well. Yeah, I think it's so I think that's a. So how do you go about working with the choreography with the different people you're making your work with?
I think the site is the boss somehow. Like the site tells me what is the choreography. So I try to. So for me, scouting and looking for locations first, which I don't do a lot. They need to come to me. So most of the sites are the villages nearby, my own village. The third film, I expanded more to the Wadi al-Qalt and the Jericho area, but usually it's around me. And then, like in the whole, I spent 1 year going to that site, just sitting there. And then I don't work with people first. I need to listen to the site, and then from the site I start imagining what would a community, what did they do there before? It was inhabited, no? And the site itself brings me the choreography. So I saw a lot of reptiles on the stairs, and the choreography, I'm being very honest now, it doesn't sound very fancy, but the choreography of the people crawling, it came from the reptiles I saw. Simple, but it's this connection with the land. No, I wanted it to be so bodily, like touching it, like this. These people claiming it, they know it very, very well. That was the feeling I wanted. But like there is a scene of a walk. For me, choreographing a walk is harder than choreographing the dance. Because how would you put minutes of just walking in a film? It's just walking. So the daily life and the space creates the choreography, and also on set with the people, it's another story of how you feel, should we do this? Let's, my mother suggests something. It's all family and friends, so it's like a picnic of shooting and deciding together.
Yes, when we were talking before this, you were saying about how you build a community around your filmmaking and how you work with the same people, and it was interesting to also hear about the role of improvisation and their input or their relationship to the films as well.
For me, this is very, very important. How to say, so my first film was my mother sewing the fish. The second film, she was also laying in the hall. My father is credited as a producer. All the names are really the village, like it takes a village to make this film somehow. how to say, wait. So, like the camera person, for example, is the same person through the 3 films. It's just working with same people and expanding us, because every film is longer and more people. So people bring their friends or their neighbors, or we are sitting in the set and then the neighbor comes, I want to be in the film, come. And my child wants to be, of course. So one of the children was one passerby. So for me, these are the magical moments that happen that I cannot really script on paper. And there is a sense of community in the way we deal with each other, the way we, all the neighbors, the passerbys, everyone wants to be in the film, everyone wants to help. It is very improvised. The camera broke, for example. We had to bring tape. Then my father suggests, no, we need to go bring whatever. It becomes very communal. Everyone wants to do something, and I mean, I have things in mind. I want to do what I do, but it comes over a lot of time and.
So then it really kind of speaks to the way the relationships in village life, and even how that has kind of evolved, and how people still kind of practice a sense of community and are also kind of engaged, and also kind of want to be engaged in everybody's business in a village. So it really kind of echoes that in a way in the making. I also wanted to, in relation to this as well, is to kind of ask you about this question of repetition and cyclical time that you have running through your practice for for a long time now, really, from even when you were a student and you did that very first piece and you were turning like in a fetal position in the desert. So this idea of the cyclical and repetition, is something I can kind of see going through the work. I wonder.
True, and I think maybe I'm never satisfied. I want to see it again and again. Mm-hmm. It's a sense of time. One time a healer told me, we understand space very well, but we don't understand time in Palestine. And it really stayed with me because I don't know this woman, and she just told me this. And I think this looping, going underground, foreground, in circles, trying to touch it again, go back to it again. There's something left in there, and in our bodies, it feels it's endless. All this grief and mourning, they are in circles somehow for me. It's also like, for me, when I want to do a film, I have to revisit the previous one. Mm-hmm. So the last film, it came from revisiting the same site. So when you see it fully, you will see similar locations, similar caves, but revisiting and going deeper and deeper. Mm-hmm. So I went inside, I found new caves, I met new people, like a friend of my father showed me another cave. So by revisiting, re-going, there's still more. Like, it's endless in Palestine, all these secrets and tales of this land.
So then almost like the landscape becomes this repository that you're constantly kind of really kind of going into, because you're going into the crevices and you're going into the spaces, but it's also like they become like a sanctuary, like a space where, as you said, a space to hide, a space to, really a kind of a sanctuary, I think, and particularly the caves also have a history of that in the location. Yeah.
Yes, for me it's a void, and how can I make in the void? And it is for me social, political, but I represent it in the space somehow. But how to touch and produce from the void, and what remains there. So all these gaps in the history, all these like leftovers, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And you really kind of feel it embodied in the landscape, and also embodies as well. We were talking a little bit about this kind of question of where does firstly, where does all the sorrow go? And another was this, in a recent talk, Taysir Batniji touched upon this, was this idea of being haunted. So this kind of combination of being haunted, but then a question of like all the sorrow. Where does all the sorrow go? And we were talking about that a little bit as well, and that kind of also echoes and reverberates all through your work.
I hope so, really. I think we are hunted, especially in Palestine. The land is hunted. And in the last film, I really tried to go underground, because what is it in there? Like something is unsettled underground that is affecting the foreground somehow. And I just wanted to go there. And the land is full of ghosts. And where does all this death go at the end? When you die not peacefully, like forcefully, then the soul doesn't exit the way it should. It's Yeah. So I really feel it when you are there. You feel the remains, the souls, the grief, the wounds are in the air, and it's too much, and we take it in, and the land is full of it. Yeah. So that's why the land for me is the main character that I wanted to show, at least in the last film, especially.
Yes, and I think with that as well, the not only just kind of being haunted the land, but as we said, also kind of carrying this, and you go and kind of excavate, or you kind of, well, actually, I wouldn't even say excavate. You go and be in the landscape in order to kind of listen to it and understand it in that way. And as you said, it's kind of it's also in all the bodies as well. It's kind of carried by the body, and it's very. The other thing I was going to mention is that the landscapes are also incredibly stark. In your films, they're not friendly landscapes. They're very stark, and that comes across with the way in which you film them as well, and how we move between dark and light, particularly in the last film. There's a kind of a harshness to it, which you're able to, I think, get across through the films. Yeah.
It's a nice reading for me, because for me it's the beautiful, harsh. It's a different beauty we have in Palestine. Yeah. And for me, yes, that land is harsh, no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And also I was again, as I was watching, I was with the first film, and I think you keep going back to a very particular location that is on this way to, which is on the way to Jericho, the particular kind of hills, and you go back to that, and you continue to go back to that. So I was wondering if you might speak to that. You did kind of mention it, but that's those hills and that space reoccur continually through your work. Yeah,
it's true. So the first film was shot between my parents' house, where my mother was sewing the fish. That's the terrace of our house, and then the Dead Sea area, or Nabi Musa area, and it's also in the last film. So it's between the villages where we are, which is also one of the most ancient in the geography, in the Bible. You read about, it's weird. And then the Dead Sea area, Jericho, Wadi al-Qalt, Nabi Musa, it's, there's something there. I'm not done with it yet, I think. There's a lot of secrets in the land. It's very low. You really feel swallowed by it. You're really literally under sea level, but you're also, it's swallowing you, so it's bigger than me. And I think I want this feeling of being intimidated by the land, so I don't impose myself, it takes me in, and then it shows me something new every time.
Yeah, it's definitely, when you go to that location, you definitely have a sense of being overwhelmed, but being overwhelmed by time and the layers of time and your presence in relation to that. You really, as you said, you feel swallowed, you feel that the vastness of it, and also, yeah, the temporality of your presence and time. It really does have a sense that so many people have passed through that landscape. It's really embodied there in the location. Yeah, you really kind of do. You really do kind of feel it there. I think. Should we open this up for questions? If anybody has any questions for Noor or any comments.
Thank you. There was one, you talked about archives a little bit, but in the last film, there's a moment where these photographs are being passed, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit more, because that's when this kind of historic document comes into the kinds of images you're making.
Yes, I wanted to create a different layer of time inside this timeless time we are in the film, and that archival photos gives you another entry to an even older time than the one we are seeing, at least. So I wanted to create this loop of people and times across the film and space. If you want the real story where I got them from, then I can tell you also. But they are from, it's the village I'm from. It's archival photos of events in that village.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed the conversation between you and learning more about why you were portraying this in your film. You said something really beautiful, so this is just a comment. I felt a lot of pain, and I felt a bit uncomfortable at the beginning, and I felt the harshness. But you said something where there is beauty in that harshness. And as I immersed myself in that, I felt that also. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions that we have? Yeah. Maybe I'll come back to that question around the harshness then, because it's very intriguing to put that in the context of the types of representations that there have been of the Palestinian landscape, the particular kind of romanticism of the Holy Land, and the way in which, and often kind of whether it was an Orientalist lens or a picturesque lens, but the harshness was, as you said, the beauty in the harshness really kind of, for myself, really kind of reveals something that is actually very much of like the lived experience of that landscape, and how you experience it. And I think also in relation to that, when you were mentioning this idea of repetition and loop, and how much loop and repetition is part of our daily lives. It's the cyclical almost becomes a weight that it's, and again, and we keep, and it's and again, but with, with a, let's say, a slight alteration each time, but we're constantly in loops that you feel. It's time being suspended, but time is also moving. It's trying to capture as you said, the lived experience of the location.
Yes, it is a liminal space we are in. It's a void, and I don't want to represent the aggressiveness and the harshness the way we consume it in the digital media. But it is a feeling in our body and in the daily life, as you said. So how to capture this feeling? This is how when I choreograph, it has to feel something, and it's mostly painful and harsh. But how to represent this in an image, in a landscape, with people, with movement. It's a lot of subtle gestures, I think.
Yeah, and I think then the nuances with what you were saying about village life and how the continuity of village life comes into that, because it's not just the starkness and the harshness of, as you said, how we see in the digital images. That there's all the contradictions of how you said, of like how everyone in the village wants to be part of it, and how, you know, you go, what goes on the other side of the camera. And you were also speaking about that there's a lot that happens that isn't on the camera. And that also kind of brings into this idea of the unseen. There is so much about the unseen in the landscape, and then how we try to kind of reveal that.
True. That's why I try to embrace the village life fully, with all the aspects of it, because it's part of how I make films. I cannot make films otherwise, I think. So it has to come through a lot of spontaneous events happening, improvisation, you know, someone finding a goat and tells me, can you film the goat? And then I said, why not? So I write a scene about the goat and I link it to the other thing. So it really takes a lot of, how to say, it's very collective there. And yes, it's beautiful and also aggressive. So it's on a daily level.
Yeah, and that's what I think also is that you're able to touch on that, because the representation of villages has been in the traditions of art practice has been so nostalgic, and has kind of created a utopia that is actually, it's kind of removed from the realities of what village life is, and also how it's transformed over time, because the villages, each one is unique to itself, but then there's also been a transformation across the decades. But you know, and how you're speaking about how you're creating what you're really kind of capturing, you know, the qualities of the village and the communal, and then the complexities of it too, that it isn't utopic.
Yes. And I turn them into rituals, maybe. Mm-hmm. So in the scenes, I just take one gesture and then intensify it to become a ritual, mm-hmm. to claim it also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, is there any background to the social choreography or the choreography of the fish? Is there any background to the first one that's completely silent, where there is no soundscape, but there's definitely like a reanimation of the fish in your body? You're the one dancing at the end. But is there like, because the village is inland, but the fish are coming from Jaffa, or is that part of your memory or background in that? Or is it more an abstract feeling of reanimating the fish within your body or in a different landscape? Or where is that? Where is the like emotions coming from that one?
So that one was 10 years ago. I changed, but I would tell you what I was thinking.
What are you thinking now?
It comes on thoughts of death and mourning, and what does it? It's around us, and I was thinking a lot in all the films of these rituals around death in the daily life, and what does it mean? And I mean, it is inland village that was open to Jerusalem, but the wall cut in the middle of it, so I could not also go to Jerusalem. And for me, this gesture of bringing us fish twice a week to Ramallah, it's very absurd. It's really, again, violent and painful. I don't know. And it felt like this, in these quantities, like bodies in these quantities, dead. It's an image that we are getting used to see, unfortunately, but it is in the air. And I wanted to, it was my first attempt back then to really just, I was telling myself, I want to put it all in. It's okay to be aggressive, harsh. I want this. It's okay. And it was my first time putting such animal that now animals are in my films, but it was the first time I use in such quantity, and with my mother gently sewing and then repeating. And this film, back then I was researching the mythology of Odysseus and the travel. He was lost in the sea, and his wife was waiting for him. And while she was waiting, she was sewing and then unsewing because she didn't want to marry. So for me, I was in that story, and I was thinking of this absence of the hero figure as a critique on it, like this hero figure we are waiting for or looking for. And for me, my mom, the woman, the female figure here is the hero, or the one who is telling us the story. Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
I think maybe just to kind of, as you were mentioning that, just maybe a last comment on in the second film on Maya and her and the piece that she was singing, and again what we were talking about this kind of haunting and sorrow, that her, like the space of the woman's body is really the space where this is articulated, and that, you know, I mean, every time I see it, there's Maya's voice in that piece is really, really kind of stays with you afterwards, I think.
Yes. The song that we heard was a song Maya and I made. So I was researching folk tales, and I gathered sentences from different folk tales, and I worked with Maya on the lamenting and nadab, how we do it in Palestine, and we just took these sentences from different folk tales and we worked on this style of lamenting. And she was down in the hall, and I saw it as a calling, or a call for survival, maybe something, and everything else is happening on the foreground, and she's calling for something, or yes. Yes, I mean, this folk tales, village life, all this knowledge that comes from the periphery, and how to recreate new sounds for these landscapes that really connect to, you know.
And also kind of, and to recreate them for now as well. You know, they're coming from the past, but you're recreating them for now and for our conditions now.
Exactly.
As well. Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
Molasses dips, or those
in the second film.
In the second film, and then there's also in the third film. There's also the repetition of the unseen, what you don't look into. But is that where dips was molasses was done, or those wells, or what were they, and what's the historical, social, geological background, whatever one you want? Yeah.
So the big hole that Maya was singing from, it used to be a well for water, and it's mentioned in the Bible as the pool of Jibun, is the name of the village. So they were fighting around it, and whoever dies, they drop the person in that well, and so it's a whole biblical also thing. And the smaller ones, they were for wine. They were, pressing the grapes, and used for storage also later. From the Roman era, this site.
Yeah, I've seen that before for molasses, so I thought it was dips, molasses. Same thing. Wine,
same, no? Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Noor. Thank you, Jameel. Thank you.